Hello, welcome to the CIMA T4 Part B Exam Technique Sections WebEx for the Southeast Asia and Australia region. My name is Samuel Lee, and I'm the Study Support and Learning Manager for CIMA. I'm a CIMA member myself. I started my career as an executive trainee with Jardine Matheson, and I studied CIMA under the sponsorship of Jardines. I've worked as a management consultant since 2008 and joined CIMA in 2011. I specialize in the enterprise pillar, E1, E2, E3, and also T4 Part B. I'm currently based in Singapore with global responsibility. So welcome again to this WebEx section, which will last about 1 hour to 1.5 hours. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We can look at T4. Sometimes you hear people say T4 is a very different paper from other CIMA exams. So how different or what are the similarities? We can look at the examination format. I'm assuming you'll be taking the T4 Part B exams in the upcoming November examination. So what you should be watching out for. We need to know the assessment criteria. So this is what the assessor, the examiner is looking from you. Time will be a huge issue in the T4 Part B. Most people will find it really pressurizing, so we're going to spend a lot of time on time management. We're also going to look at the T4 exam, how it's being marked, so to give you a bit more insight how you can be more effective in scoring your marks. Finally, we're going to look at some study resources from CIMA and also to look into the transition into the 2015 syllabus. If for whatever reason you are unsuccessful in these examinations, what would happen in 2015? I'm going to walk through section by sections of the report to give you a lot of insight on how you should structure your report, what is going to get you marks and what may not. So first of all, welcome to the business world. As I said earlier, T4 Part B is a very different paper compared to other CIMA examinations, and congratulations to coming this far. Some of you may have started right from the beginning at the certificate level. Some of you may have joined halfway, but no matter what, I'm sure you have come a long way, and congratulations, this is your final CIMA exam. The main difference between this paper and other paper is this white paper, you feel really real. You've got a pristine case that you got an industry that you need to research on, and you no longer have very specific exam questions that examiner said all you have to do is to write a business report. The examiner expected you to be as professional as you can be. This is your final hurdle before you can call yourself a CIMA member, a chartered management accountant. So first of all, this is very real. This is like you working in the business world. So if you are currently already working, I think you have an advantage because you can see a lot of similarity, or you can bring your experience from work into this paper as well. So what are the difference between T4 and other CIMA examinations? Well, it's a natural progression from the strategic level, and it's an integrated test of syllabus drawn mainly from the strategic level, but not exclusively. So that means all of the syllabus content you have learned from the certificate level right up to the strategic level can be tested in the T4 Part B examinations. There's no specific syllabus. The case will be mainly drawn from the 3 pillars and act as a capstone. You're required to have a thorough understanding of the whole CIMA syllabus and be able to apply your knowledge to the case scenario. It's going to be less structure. Examiner is going to recognize there's alternatives. That means there's not always just one solution like the strategic level examinations. As long as you can justify your answer, it is a right answer. However, there's still a lot of similarity with other CIMA examinations. As I just said, there's strong emphasis on applications, analysis, and decision making and recommendation skill. You're still required to have really good business sense. Examiners can look at your recommendations and see if they're practical or can be implemented in real-life situations. Again, time management is going to be a key to success in these exams. you will need to be able to practice as much as you can between now and the exam to sharpen your time management skill. So examination format. There's a pre-seen case which is available to download now from the CIMA website. On the exam day, you have received another 36 pages approximately of unseen material, including new proposal and problem and key events given on the exam day. So what you need to do now is, if you have not already downloaded your pre-seen case from the CIMA website, you need to do it as soon as possible and get yourself familiarized with the industry and the case and the company being presented in the pre-seen. But don't forget, the most important part is actually the unseen material. So the pre-seen is there to set the tone, set the foundations, to give you time to actually research onto that industry. Most of the issue that you will face in the examinations will be coming from the 6 pages unseen you receive on the day. There will be 2 requirements that you'll be asked to do for the T4 Part B. Number 1 is requirement A, which you will be asked to prepare a report that prioritize, analyze, and evaluate the issue facing the company and make appropriate recommendations. This will be adding up to 90 marks. The remaining 10 marks actually go to section B, which is testing your communication skill test. So you may be asked to do a slide for presentations, to write an email, to write a letter, or draw a graph or a chart. The reason to have this section B is because when we update this syllabus, again, our employer tells us that they do not just want management accountant who can do the number crunching, who can do reports. They also want management accountant who are able to communicate the idea to different audience. So you need to think very carefully when you do Part B who you're writing to. Are you writing to other finance people, or you're writing to the general public, or you're writing for people who have no finance understanding? So you need to tone your communications accordingly. For the whole exams, you will have 3 hours to do, and you will have 20 minutes reading time like any other CIMA examination before for you to read the paper. To pass the exam, you will need to have 25 credits out of 50, which is, of course, it's like getting 50 marks out of 100. For T4, you may have a choice to do it either on the PC-based exam or paper-based. There's no difference in the approach. The only difference is that on a paper-based exam, on the exam day, you receive the question booklet and then 2 answer booklets. So you'll be actually writing your answer with pen on the answer booklet itself. For the PC-based exam, you will still have the question booklet, but instead of the answer booklet, you'll be writing your answer on the computer using Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. Do check with your local center on the version of the Word and Excel that they'll be using, and ensure you're familiarized with the additions that your exam center is using. But apart from that, there's no difference in the approach in terms of how you plan your answer, your time management, and also in terms for the marking criteria. So both examinations, no matter you're doing on the paper-based or PC-based, will be marked with the same standard. So what the examiner is actually looking from you? As I said, this is your final paper before you can call yourself a chartered management accountant. So we want to make sure you do have some technical knowledge. So when you tell people you're a management accountant, yes, you can still do your number crunching. And more importantly, that you can apply the technical knowledge in an analytical and practical manner. You will need to extract knowledge from various subjects and solve many-sided and complex problems. So that means you're not just drawing your knowledge from the strategic level, but maybe from the management and operational level as well. You'll be given a lot of information both in the pre-seen and the unseen on the day. And of course, adding to that is your own research on the industry, and you need to be able to distinguish what is relevant and what is not relevant. This is just like you working in a company. If your boss asks you to do a research, you will go onto Google and then you type in a keyword to search. What you get is a huge range of different websites, different articles, different information. You have to actually go through and decide what is useful, what is relevant to what you have to research on. So that's one of the skills the examiner is trying to test you. You'll be given a whole range of problems in both the pre-seen and the unseen. Again, you need to identify what are the problems and rank them in order which they need to be addressed. So some problem is going to be more serious than the other and require immediate attention. So you need to be able to prioritize to see which one is more important based on the impact and also the consequences of not addressing that. We do appreciate that there can be alternative solutions and understand the role of judgment in dealing with them. So, for example, when you're being given a problem, there would be more than one way to deal with that problem, and the examiner do appreciate that, and he or she also want you to show that appreciation. That means in terms of your discussion, you should not just talk about one side. You should look at the same issue from different angle. When you give recommendations, you may give more than one recommendations or possible recommendations, and then come to the conclusion which one you will take and give your justifications. Examiner is also looking for your ability to integrate diverse area of knowledge and skills and communicate effectively, and give realistic recommendations in a business report format. You will still have to able to identify the ethical dilemmas, as there's 10 marks is going to be going to ethics. So this in a nutshell what examiner is looking from you. So if you have not yet downloaded your pre-seen material, you should do it as soon as possible. They're available to download from the website. When you're here to do WebEx, you should also have access to download this PowerPoint in a PDF format, and you can see here I've been putting some link here to link to resources either on CIMA Global website or to other resources online. So do click on that and go through and download and go through different materials. So you have to read and be very familiarized with the pre-seen case before you go into the examinations. You would not have time to read it again in the exam. You would not be able to bring in your own notes during examinations, but you'll be given a fresh copy of the pre-seen when you're in the exam room. There's some really good analysis, and I would particularly to encourage you to read the analysis by Mr. Adrian Sims, who is a T4 expert based in the UK. So this is a very comprehensive analysis and should give you a very good start if you have not yet done much research on the pre-seen case on the EL car company. I would also encourage you to look at the September 2014 exam paper, which is based on the same pre-seen case. So this is the closest you can get, like a mock exam paper from the examiner, what may come up. Due to fairness reason, we have not released the answer for the September-November 14 examinations. But nonetheless, this is a very good example of how the examiner may use different pre-seen, unseen case on the day to take you to a new level based on the same pre-seen material. You need to have very good business sense when you do the T4 Part B, and I hope that you have been reading business newspaper and being up to date of what is happening in the world. If not, then I think I would suggest you start reading Financial Times and also the BBC News business section. These are very good and easy to read documents. Do particularly look out for information related to the industry, the car industry, because you may want to make reference to them, and you'll be able to gain diversity marks by quoting relevant real-life examples. There are other resources by other tuition providers. I put a few here. So there are two videos done by Nick Best from Astranti, again in the UK. One is a pre-seen analysis, and another one is a sample of the top 10 predicted issues that he has done. Again, you take this as just as a reference. They are, again, as I always say, it's an opinion from experienced tutors, so they definitely have value in that, but they're not definitely something that will happen in the examinations. Another introduction is done by Sri Lankan from Top CIMA Pass. So again, these are YouTube videos free of charge that I would encourage you to go and download and have a look in your free time. So looking at the assessment criteria, T4 Part B, this is the assessment matrix, and unlike other papers, you're not going to get very specific exam questions So you will be asked to write a report, and the report will be marked in this criteria. You can see there are three main areas that you get marks on. One, is the analysis. The second is strategic choice, and the third one is recommendations. So we're going to walk through, each of this section by section, and you can see each part is going to be further divided. Say in analysis of issue, it's further divided into technical, application, and diversity. So I'm actually going to talk through each section in huge details about how you're going to get marks or what you should be doing in each section. So first of all, under the area of analysis of issue, which is 25 marks altogether, you have the technical and the applications. Technical, you do have 5 marks, and marks are being awarded for using relevant theory and models and performing relevant calculation. Relevant is a very important term here, so there's no point just to name drop or just to quote something. You need to make sure that you're choosing the theory or models that is actually applicable and relevant to the scenario that you're looking at. Due to time constraint, I would say limit to 5 to 6 items maximum, including the calculations. You're going to be given 1 mark per relevant models for the technical and a few more marks for the application if your models have been applied correctly. So that means that even if you have been using 10 different models, you're not going to get more than 5 marks. So some of even if you use 10 different models, some of your models it would not score any at all because you have already reached the maximum marks that you can get for the technical area. So some of these would be very useful. Most of them you will have covered in E3 already, some maybe even earlier in the E-papers. If you're not familiarized with some of these models, it's a good idea to go back and just refresh yourself on these. SWOT analysis, you're required to do a SWOT analysis. Some people like to do a PEST analysis. Personally, I'm not so keen on PEST. Not that it's not useful, but it's just simply take a lot of time to write. I'm going to show you more about that later. Mendelow's stakeholder matrix, another one of my favorites. The Johnson and Scholes SFA suitability, feasibility, and accessibility test. Again, this also is a must. Again, I'm going to show you how to use it later. Other useful ones, you plotted generic strategies, answer of growth strategies, and other basic financial ratios. So it's good to have a few of these models in your pocket, and according to the unseen on the day, you can actually decide which one to use. Some models, for example, the SWOT, can be prepared in advance, but they must also include the unseen material on the exam day. So you may also sometimes want to just introduce a model and just to explain very briefly about its relevance. For example, for the Johnson & Scholes SFA test, you can say it's useful to test the viability of a strategy. So just to show the examiner you know what you're doing and you're not just simply name dropping. Remember, name dropping is not going to get you any marks in the examination. Whatever you're using has to be relevant to the case. So as I said, SWOT is a must. That would be the first thing I will actually be doing when I get the pre-scene is actually to drop a SWOT analysis. So that's something you can actually prepare at home before your examination, and you should almost know the SWOT analysis by heart. On the exam day, when you go to the exam room, the first thing you will actually be doing is to, of course, after your reading time, is to write up your SWOT analysis in the appendix. So you will be, you should have learned it by heart, but don't forget to include the new issues that come into your unseen. So as I show you here, you will have the 4 quadrants of, the strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, and some of the items you will have put in already in advance of the examinations, but always include the new issues, either opportunity or threat that you see in the unseen. In that way, not only that you will get the technical mark is given there for drawing up this quadrant for SWOT, but you also get the application marks by incorporating the new elements from the unseen into this model as well. Mendelow's, as I said, is another of my favorite because no matter what is the company, you will have stakeholders. So it's really good to use this. You can draw the diagram. Again, it's not very, it shouldn't take you very long if you draw it by hand and paper. If you're doing with computer, again, it can be done very quickly with the table function in Microsoft Word. So do practice how to do it very quickly, so to save time. I will actually put down, in the 4 area under key players, keep informed, keep satisfied, and minimum effort, according to the pre-seen and the unseen, who are the people that actually in this area. So you can actually refer to them in your report. Some tutor may suggest that you do not have to draw the diagram, which is possible. You may simply say the shareholder a key player, quoting high power, high interest in the many stakeholder matrix. But I do prefer to draw the diagram because I think it's easy and it shouldn't take too long, and it actually helps me in the exam room to have clarity about the stakeholder relationship as well. But it's really up to you whether you want to drop this or you just want to quote the model as I've shown you in the sentence here. So technical will also include, apart from the models, include the calculations. So there's around 10 marks on the application side. It actually is awarded for calculations. Usually calculation for T4 Part B are quite straightforward. Like in Year 3, the difficulty is to attempt them under very tight time restrictions. With calculation, it's actually going to put you at a disadvantage because if you're not able to do your number crunching, the examiner will have a huge question marks whether you should be calling yourself a management accountant. So it's important to get your calculation correct. There's some very common calculations that come up time after time in the T4 Part B. Again, if some of them you haven't done for a while, I would definitely encourage you to spend some time to refresh yourself. Cash flow, profit reforecast, I think these are quite common in recent sitting. You may be asked to do investment appraisal, including NPV calculation and other very popular one, IRR or earning per share, marginal costing, budgeting, variance analysis, and again, some basic financial ratio as well. So this is not the complete list, but I'm just pointing out what are the area that has been coming up recurringly in the T4 Part B. When you're doing calculations, do highlight the limitation and the assumption for your calculations. We do know that you're going to under a lot of time pressure, and there will be, in some of the calculations, you will have to force to make some assumptions because you're not being given that in the both the pre-seen and the unseen. So it's okay to make assumptions. So a 4-step guide to how to do the calculations. Of course, first of all, there will be the financial data in your pre-seen. You should be familiarized with these numbers. So again, you can refer to them very quickly when you're doing an examination, and you do not have to go back and forth and try to look for figures that you have seen somewhere. So you should be knowing your pre-seen like the back of your hand. So step 1, identify the essential calculations and all the relevant numbers to be included, both from your pre-seen and the unseen. So use your reading time to collect all the relevant data. Like other CIMA exams, you're allowed to write, to highlight, annotate on the question paper during your reading time. So do bring whatever you like. I always like to circle, highlight figures, or put them on a different table aside so that I can easily refer to these figures during the examination and not going to have to go back and forth. Step 2, you should consider the presentation and layout of your calculation. It's very important that you show the marker what you're doing, and he or she can really follow your calculations. All calculations should be done in your appendix, not in your main report. So again, you have a lot of space. You have a different booklet to write on. So make sure you space out, and then make sure you label, the different working correctly. Label all the columns and row. If possible, work in thousands where possible. If again, there's no point to write a lot of zeros. It's just going to waste your time. And always show your working. The reason just, is that in case you make some mistake, a silly mistake in your calculations, but if your working is correct, you will still get most of the marks. But then do the calculation, of course. After that, spend a few seconds to do a sense check. Ask yourself, is this what you're expecting, or does this seem reasonable? If you're doing an investment appraisal and then you find a project, you actually get 10 times the return. Well, I think you should ask yourself, if such a project, do exist, I think it's quite rare that in reality that we'll see such project that you get 10 times the return. So again, then in that case, go back and check your figures. As I said, it's important to get these figures correct so that when the whole argument would sound. Finally, do you understand what exactly that figures mean? Understand what you have been calculating and why you've been doing that. Stand back and take a view of the bigger picture and how this actually means to the business. For example, when you're doing cash flow, ask yourself, if the company is still in healthy conditions, can it still pay its bills, or is it going to get bankrupt next week already? Again, this is going to affect how you're going to make your decisions. When you're looking at a project and investment, then look at how it will affect the bottom line, and how this may affect the shareholder decision view on the company. Again, this will affect when you make your recommendations. At the end of the day, do stick to your calculations. Once you're done, do not go back and change it back and forth. You're not going to have a lot of time. You will have to go with whatever you have calculated, and based on your number to make your argument. So here's some examiner tips in general for the technical application area. So you have to do a SWOT analysis. This is coming very, very clear with the examiner. So a SWOT analysis, again, is a must. And all of the prioritized issues that you will discuss in your report has to be included in your SWOT analysis. The model should be presented in a way that provides information just as what I've shown you. So there's no point just to draw a model on its own. Again, you're just going to get 1 mark for the technical, but no 0 marks for the application. So it must provide information. You must incorporate information from both the pre-seen and the unseen. Do you understand the numerical and the financial implications? You should be well prepared for cash flow calculations. They have been keep recurring since 2012, and the examiner has made it very explicit that it will come back again and again. Try to produce the calculation as accurate as possible. Do a sense check, as I said, and if you're not sure, give you another 5 minutes and go back just to check some of the working. Do focus on the unseen rather than the pre-seen. This is where your main issue will be coming from. The pre-seen is really there to set a tone, but the main focus, the main issue you should be discussing should be coming from the 6-page unseen which you receive on your dates of examinations. There will be 5 marks for diversity and integrations. So diversity actually marks award for according to the range of relevant real-life example that you use to illustrate the point that you're making to show your industry and business awareness. You will get 1 mark per relevant point, so up to 5 sources would be enough. Again, this can be prepared in advance and include in your introductions. My suggestion is don't overdo it, both in terms of preparation and in exam. Some people get really carried away and then go into huge details to do research. Excellent, but again, at the end of the day, you're only going to get 5 marks for this. Again, simply name dropping is not going to get you any marks. So you have to make it very clear that how you illustrate your answer. Again, if you can quote example from car company, very good. But sometimes you can also quote example from other industry as well. For example, you may want to talk about product differentiations and use Apple iPhone as an example. That's possible to use as well. But then again, also make sure that whatever you're quoting are relevant. Sometimes students ask me, can we actually quote example from local, for example, from Malaysia or from Australia or from Singapore here? Yes, you can. But again, the question I want to ask is that, if your example are well known enough. Okay, examiner is based in the UK, and he or she may not be well aware of the company that you're quoting. And if you have to spend a lot of time trying to to explain that, that example is not helping you. You have to further explain the example to give the background to justify your point. So I will say for examinations, although examiners say they welcome local example, but I would say stick to international names that people are well known. So IBM, Apple, Coca-Cola, hotel groups. So these are the kind of good examples that you can actually use, and people can relate it to them very, very easily. There's no need to quote examples from the UK only. That is not the expectation from the examiner. I would say, if getting 5 marks from this area is quite rare, but you should at least target to get 2 to 3. So you should, be well prepared for that. If you're working in a group with your friends or have a study group, again, it's a wonderful opportunity that you can work together with your colleagues or with your fellow classmates. So each of you can do some research and you can share that result together. So all of you can save a bit of time in terms of research, and then you can work together as a team. The integration, again, you got 5 marks for that. Is to test whether you can write a cohesive and comprehensive report. So that means if your report is incomplete for whatever reason, because you're missing a part out or you run out of time, you're not going to get very, very few marks for this area. In fact, there's not much really you need to do to get this integration marks. If you have a good, complete report that is coherent in its format, in its argument, you should get pretty good marks for integration already. So I would suggest you should have a report that have a brief introduction, a terms of reference, the content, and then a conclusion. And of course, all of these can be prepared in advance. They don't have to be very long. My suggestion is you know them by heart. So as soon as you go into exam room, when you're allowed to write, you just quickly type or write it out. So this will be the suggested report format that we have suggest students to use. They've been used for many years already, even since the previous syllabus on the 2005. So they are something that examiner quite used to. Of course, you can use other format if you want to, but again, I think this has been over time to be proved to be something that examiner do welcome. So you should include the following format. You should introduction. Again, this you can prepare in advance. Term of reference, just a very simple one. If you're not sure how to do this, you can go back and look at the past examiner answer and just use that as a reference. They don't have to be very long. 1 or 2 sentences is more than enough. Part 3 should be the prioritizations of issues facing the company. In this case, will be the EL car company. Part 4 should be the discussions of issues facing the company. I'm going to talk more about later in the next section. What is the difference between discussions and the prioritization and also recommendations. Sometimes students get confused and keep repeating the same content, which is again is wasting time. The requirement exam is looking for these areas are quite specific, and the way to write is quite different. Section 5, we suggest you write about the ethical issues and recommendation on the issues, and section 6 come to the recommendation. Again, you should have a very short conclusion just in the end to ensure your report is complete. And then you have your appendix. This is where you put all your theory to do all your calculations. If you're doing paper-based exam, you will be usually given 2 exam booklets. So one booklet can be used for the appendix, and the other one used for the report itself. If you're doing PC-based, most of the time you do your appendix at the end or on the Excel if you're doing calculations. So keep your reports on the Word files and the appendix at the very end, and then do the calculation in the Excel. Do not try to do the report in Excel. It's not the right template to use, and you're going to waste a lot of time messing around with the formatting. So do note the way that I structure the report here. So you should have 3.1 for the first priority, 3.2 for the second priority, and so on and so forth. And this priority should 3.1 should correlate with 4.1 in the discussion, and also 6.1 in the recommendations. So it's very clear that that your prioritization, you have done your discussion, and then you have done your recommendations. Okay, so that's run up. So we have talked about technical applications and diversity. So these are mainly from the analysis of the issue. I'm going to move on to the second part, which is looking at the strategic choice, which is worth 25 marks of the examinations. So the main area here is the focus and the prioritizations. So focus is to test your ability to go through a mass of pre-seen and unseen data and to pick out the relevant information. So brain dumping of pre-learned irrelevant material has no marks on it. Again, there's no such, you do not have to prepare very specially for this focus mark. If you have a good report and follow the guidelines I'm giving you in this WebEx section, you should get fairly decent mark for the focus as well. Prioritization is test your ability to rank the issue raised in a priority order that reflect the potential impact and the urgency. So the key word here is impact and urgency. What is the impact of the issue, both financially and non-financially? and the urgency. Is it something you need to deal with immediately, or something that you can deal with in the next few months? You should identify between 4 to 5 issues. The higher marks is going to be given to the top few priorities given. So it's quite important to get your ranking correct. You need to justify your ranking with a concise explanation. So not just saying what should be done, on the top priority, but you also need to explain why this is more important than the others. Examiner has made it very clear there's no certain death if the prioritization does not agree with the suggested answer, but you need to clearly justify why you have made the prioritizations. In my opinion, although there's no certain death, again, you'll be at a huge disadvantage if your ranking is completely different from the examiner, mainly because the market already has a very set expectation in his or her mind. And if you're quite different, you're kind of working against the current, and you have to be extra good in your justifications to convince the market why you should do the prioritization in a different way. I mean, not saying that you cannot, but again, this is going to waste you a lot of time and energy. So do practice your prioritization with doing a lot of mock paper. For this exam, the best to do is actually do mock paper based on the same pre-scene. Unfortunately, the only thing you will get is the September 2014 examination, which you do not have the official answer yet. If finance is not a huge issue, I do hugely recommend you to purchase a few mock exams from some of the providers such as Kaplan and BPP. And some of times they do come with a marking services. The more of these mock exams based on the real case you've done, the better chance of passing. The second best is to look at previous year questions, which are not as good because they're based on different industry, different pre-scene. And sometimes I'm just worried that students may get confused by looking at too many different industries, and you would simply do not have the time to do the in-depth research as you would be doing for the car company. But again, if you do not want to purchase other mock exams from other providers, what you can do is just skim through the pre-seen and the unseen of previous examinations, and then do your ranking and compare your answer to the examiner, and then read the rationale to see whether if they're matching up. This is again is a good way for you to just do a sense check whether you're on the right track or not, or whether you're thinking similar to what the examiner could be thinking. There's no shortcut in this. The more practice you do, the better. But there's a bit of guidelines that again I can give you here. So as I said, you should be looking at your issue based on the impact and the urgency. So usually I would drop a table to summarize all the information I found in the pre-seen and the unseen. So first of all, you should have in your SWOT analysis to identify whether this is there's an opportunity or it's a threat to the company. So here I put like ONT to symbolize that. You look at the impact, whether it's financial impact. So for example, this is complete. I just make this up. What is the impact? So for example, issue 1, the impact is a £2 million deal. So that's quite a large one. Whereas comparing to issue 3, maybe we're just looking at a 500k pounds deal there. So again, that's a difference there. Sometimes the impact could be non-financial. For example, you could get something that would be lead to a legal case. So your company can be sued for whatever reason. So yes, I mean that is non-financial, but I think that could have huge implications on the branding and the future success of the company. So that should be taken into consideration as well. You look at the urgency. A lot of the time, if you're giving project or proposal, they will give a date when you need to feedback to the counterpart. So that would be your deadline. Sometimes, some of the issues could be more urgent that will require immediate attention. So based on these, then you can start to rate your priorities. Usually, a threat would come on top of an opportunity if they are sort of quite similar. So in this case, if you look at my issue 2, I will give it top priority because legal issue that can be having huge consequences to the future success of the company. And if someone is going to sue your company now, that's something you need to take action immediately. So this will give me my top priorities. Whereas if you compare to issue 1 and issue 3, issue 1, I give it more priorities because the impact is greater, and also I need to give it feedback a lot earlier comparing to issue 3 as well. Some of the issues identified may not be too significant. For example, number 4 here is just unclear, so you may not even have time to go to discuss that. Remember, you only have 3 hours, so sometimes you may not have enough time to discuss everything, but I would say at least target to talk about at least something like 4 to 5 issues if you're able to do that. So this is how you should be writing out in your report format for your prioritization. So again, this is what I make up here. So 3.1 is the top priorities, and you list what is that issue, and then you use this is the top priority issue because, and you underline this. So you make it very clear to the examiner that you actually, this is the top priority, and you're giving the justification. So for example, my top priority for me is to pass the CIMA T4 examination, because after passing this, I will be CIMA members and can use the designation ACMA. This will be huge recognition of my ability as a management accountant, and I will have a huge pay rise immediately. So this is, I'm giving the impact and the urgency. So the impact is I will get recognition and get the financial, pay rise as a benefit, and I will get it immediately. So this is, this is showing the urgency. And also failing to do that, I'm likely to lose my job. So this, this is about, whether I can still exist in my current company. So you can see the way that I'm painting the picture to say to the market, this is so important, I have to do it right now. And 3.2, as I said, should be your second priority. For me here, again, I make this up. It's going to gym 3 times a week. So going to the gym will keep me healthy and help me to release stress from studying CIMA. So this is related to priority number 1, but also it's not as important because it's not, it's not a direct influence. This will help me to study more and helping me to achieve my top priorities. If I fall ill, I won't be able to prepare for my exam, and my performance at work will also be affected. So this is second priority. Again, make it very clear, make it very explicit, underline it, and make sure the examiner know that you're making that statement very clearly with justifications. You may feel that a lot of these reports, the format is quite truthful. I can share with you, from my own experience, you do have to be very explicit and trying to show whatever you can. It's a bit like, doing your driving test. I remember when I take my driving test in the UK, my instructor always say, look at the mirror and make sure you turn your head, so your instructor actually know that you've looked at your mirror, not just rolling your eye and try to from the angle of it. So you have to be very explicit and show the examiner that you know what you're doing and you're doing what he or she is asking for. Okay, so we talk about focus and prioritizations, and then usually, like, in my experience, most people, they would do quite well in the technical and also not too bad in the prioritizations. However, most of them fail because they got very, very poor marks in judgment and logic. So you can see judgment and logic together add up to 15 marks in this criteria matrix. So if you want to pass, you have to do well, or at least get 50% from this area to able to pass your T4 Part B examinations. So what are judgment and what are logic? Judgment basically is what, and logic is why. So there's a few models will be useful here. The useful models to use will be the answer of products and market matrix, product generic strategies, the SFA test, and the Mandela stakeholder matrix. So you actually use all of these in your discussions. You need to do analysis of issue and draw upon different data you get from your pre-seen and unseen, and also your financial calculations. So the judgment and the logic would come into 2 parts within the report. One part is the discussion, which is section 4, and the second part is section 6, which is the recommendations. So in discussion, you talk about, like the word discuss suggests, you talk about the impact of the issue. You look at alternative issue actions that can be taken, and then you look at different side of the argument. For example, if you're being given an opportunity, then you need to look at what is the possible impact of this opportunity, why you should be doing it, and why you should not be doing it. You should use the SFA to test if this is in line with the company's strategies. If it is a threat, again, you need to think of like more than one possible mitigations that you can do to mitigate the risk of a threat. again, you need to look at the impact of the issue as well. So recommendation is a follow-up on that. So it's not to repeat what you do. So in the discussion, you only have to present a picture. You're looking from different angle, but there's no need to give the recommendation at the discussions. Of course, I think the discussion should be structured in a way it's very clear what recommendation you're going to make, but there's no need to make a recommendation. It's going to make in section 6. And you need to talk about, what is the exam recommendations. You need to justify your action, why you're doing that, and you also need to give a few steps of implementations. So if you're suggesting, we should take a project, you should suggest who's project leader, what is the timing, who's going to respond to the counterpart. So this is, a bit more comprehensive than just, giving one line, I recommend the company to do this and stop there. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. So discuss, you need a two-sided argument, and it is testing your ability to say things from various angles. So just to summarize, if, whatever you're discussing in your priorities, if it is threat, you need to talk about the impact. Be realistic, don't make it sound too dramatic, but talk about the impact in both financial and non-financial terms. Give at least two options on how to deal with it. One option is always to do nothing. So on top of that, you can give two more options, from different angle, and from each option, try to give the pros and cons of why you're doing that. What is the merit, what is the shortfall of that actions. If the issue you're discussing is an opportunity, then use the models of Johnson & Fro SAF and the Mandela stakeholder matrix to evaluate if it's a suitable project and how it would impact the different stakeholders in the company. Usually you would have, if it's a project, you would have done a calculation already. So use your financial calculations and to calculate the possible outcome, the possible impact to the company as well. As I said, it should be logical flow into the recommendations. So if times allow, all issues that you have prioritized in section 3 should be discussed in section 4. However, I know some of you will probably run into a situation that you're running out of time and trying to cut a little bit of a corner. In that case, do make sure that you write a very, very good discussion for at least top 2 to 3 issues, because they're going to bear more marks than issue 4 and 5. If you really do not have time, then just do a very brief one for 4 and 5. But you should try to at least cover all of the issues that you have been discussed in, you've mentioned in your section 3 under the prioritizations. So recommendation, as I said, should be a follow-on from your discussion. It should not be a surprise to the reader why you're making that recommendation. So it's, the way we're trying to present is like we do the discussion, and logically that would bring you to the recommendation you're going to make. So the question you should be asking yourself in this section is, have you been given more than one recommendations, either flowing in time or others are part of one overall recommendations? It is clear, how recommendations should be undertaken. Have you stated who will undertake the recommendation? Is the timing of your recommendation status? So, you need to talk about, how to carry out the recommendations, when, and who is going to take care of it. And of course, always say why you're doing that recommendations. So in the report format, this is what I would suggest you to use. Again, 6.1 should correlate with 3.1, which is your prioritizations, and also 4.1 is your discussions. I would suggest at least 3 subparts under 6.1. The one is the recommendation. So make it very clear what recommendations that you're taking. So for in my case about passing CIMA T4 exam, the recommendation is that Sam does 1 past exam paper per week under exam condition to strengthen his exam technique. Okay, so that's very clear what I'm recommending to do. Justification why I'm doing that is because practicing past exam paper is the best way to prepare exam, and doing them under exam condition can improve the time management skill. Action to be taken. So this is how I will actually do it. First, download all the exam paper from the CIMA Global website. Set aside 3 hours on Saturday afternoon for exam practice, and it should start immediately to maximize effect. So I'm giving a few steps, quite simple, and then also to give the time frame for it as well. So just to another summarize here, short summaries here on examiner tips. Do spend sufficient time on the fundamental analysis, which means that in terms for thinking and calculation, do make sure you think through properly before you start writing. I think it's very important that I know there's a temptation to start writing as soon as possible, but at the same time, make sure you do give yourself time to do the analysis. All of the prioritized issue must be discussed. You need to discuss both the financial and non-financial implications. You need to show real and practical business sense. So there's no point to suggest something that you would not suggest to your boss in your workplace. So you need to be very practical here. As I said many times already, focus on the unseen, not the pre-seen, and also not previous mock examination. If you're doing a lot of mock exam, some people tend to get confused. So do make sure you focus on the actual unseen. Recommendation has to be justified, saying why. And avoid very vague recommendations. Say, do something about it, or appoint a consultant to review. I mean, you are the consultant to review already, so there's no point to appoint another consultant to further review. And do not suggest the board should meet and discuss. Again, you need to be quite specific in your recommendations. Try to not to leave any issue undecided. So whatever you have, identified as an issue, you should discuss and make recommendations. But of course, if time is not enough, focus on your top 3. Because they bear more marks. Do avoid, referring to the options number. So if you give a few options to take, do not say option 1. Again, examiner may be confused. Try to, make it very clear that what recommendation you're making, and your recommendation should be consistent with, and be ethical. So that means that you should not make one recommendation that the company should sell off some of its subsidiary and consolidate. And then another recommendation is to suggest the company to buy off new company to start new business stream. They're not consistent. It should be a coherent report, coming from the same person to the same board of director, and they should be aligned with the company's strategies. And again, it has to be ethical. So do not suggest the company to exploit the employee. Do not suggest bribery, even if you may feel that bribery is just a way of doing business. But from CIMA point of view, is no. So, bribery is illegal, and it's something we do not do. Make sure that your recommendations are ethical. So speaking on the ethics part, you do get 10 marks altogether for ethics. It's quite important. 5 marks is for identifying and evaluating the ethical issues, and another 5 marks for making appropriate recommendations. You're expected to identify a range of ethical issues and explaining why each of these is an ethical issue, and discuss them and make recommendations. Usually, I would say, suggest, 2 issues will be quite sufficient. I know that you'll be under time pressure, and you may not even have enough time to do 2. If you do not have 2, then try to do at least 1 ethical issue. But try to, I think 2 is the more ideal to get you, hopefully, to give you at least a good, 6 or 7 marks out of 10. But otherwise, do at least 1 ethical issue. Do not, again I repeat, ignore the ethics part. It's worth 10 marks. It's a lot of marks there, and you cannot, you cannot afford to throw away these marks. Most people pass the T4 Part B, in the range of 25, 26, 27. If you get anything above 30 out of 50, it's very good marks already. So so throwing away 10 marks here is almost crazy and suicidal, in my opinion. So again, ethics issue, I would recommend you go to the CIMA Global website and check out our ethics page. I think there's a lot of good information here, especially on ethics at a glance. It tells you what an ethical issue is. Not something illegal. It's usually something in the gray area. So it gives you a lot of good understanding of what ethics is, and would help you to spot ethical issues from your exam as well. So the final 10 marks of the exam is coming from the requirement B. As I said, is to test your ability to communicate effectively in a different format from a simple business report. So you may be asked to write an email, a letter, to do a presentation draft, or even to draw a graph and chart. You would not be required to use a PowerPoint for the PC-based exam people. So mostly they will ask you to do a draft for the PowerPoint, which you can just simply do in your Word document. Do consider who the document is for. Make sure your content and the tone you use are correct, and do follow the specific requirements. So if the requirements say ask you to draw a graph, then do draw a graph. If you ask you to do a pie chart, do not give them a bar chart or line chart. So do follow the requirement, otherwise you're not going to get any marks. If it says to just use 10 sentences to summarize, then do not give 11. For the PC-based exam, do familiarize how to do a graph in Excel. It would come into handy. If you're doing traditional pen and paper, then you can just use a ruler to plot your graph. It doesn't have to be super accurate, but at least it should be to scale. And if you have forget how to do it, then it may be a good time to go back to your A-level study. I'm sure you have plotted graph before using pen and paper. Again, do not, and I repeat, do not ignore Part B. It's again worth 10 marks. So same rationale as I said in the ethics. These are supposed to be easy marks. So by throwing them away or not doing that due to time limitation, it's going to affect your chance of passing quite severely. So yeah, we talked a lot about the time, and I want to bring this to say that there's no, in the past for CIMA paper, we always say 1.8 minutes per time is available because we do not have a very clear marks, for the whole report here. Doesn't mean that we don't follow that guidelines, but I think you need to be a bit more sensitive. And all I want to say is there's no fixed rule how you do it. The way I'm showing here is the way I would do it. I've done it. I've used this approach and been successful. But there's no fixed rule. I think each of us have different working style, and you may want to, adjust the timing accordingly. The best way to do, again, as I said, is to do mock exam paper based on the real case, and then try to time yourself and see how, what approach works best for you. I think I actually have tried a few different approach, and and come to this approach that I believe works best for me. So you will actually, have 3 hours altogether for this examination, plus of course the 20 minutes reading time. So of course during the reading time you should read your unseen material and start thinking and planning what calculation you use, what model you'll be using. Once the exam started, in my approach I will actually give myself another 15 minutes. So I'm not rushing into writing yet. So I'm going to have 20 minutes plus 15 minutes. So that's all together is 35 minutes in terms of giving me planning and thinking. So hopefully I will have a very good idea what I'm going to write about, what tone, what models I'm going to use, what calculation I'll be doing. I will spend around 30 minutes on the appendix itself, and that will be the first thing I'll be doing to do the calculations. If you're slow in doing calculations, you may want to give yourself another 5 minutes here. But what that means is you have to find a time somewhere in the report, so you may have to write quicker in some other area. The contents page, the introduction in terms of reference, can be done in advance. So usually, I think you can do actually less than 8 minutes if you're, if you're very quick. So there should be something that you have learned the format already, and just go in there and write out, what you have pre-learned already. If not, then do one. You identify the issue and you make the recommendations. The recommendation part, a lot of people really rush this, which is not a good idea. I would give myself at least 45 minutes for recommendations, because a lot of the marks from the judgment and the logic actually come into this area. So I will give it a good 45 minutes to write down my recommendation, to justify and talk about each step. Finally, conclusions. I think again, just 1 or 2 sentences will do, so you may only need about like 2 to 3 minutes just very quickly to write out, the conclusions for just saying that, if the company, EL car company, followed the suggestions you mentioned in this report, they will continuously to be successful. That will be more than sufficient. And then, leave the final 15 minutes to do your part B because it's still worth 10 marks here. So again, this is just a guideline, so I'm not suggesting you have to follow exactly the same, but then you should try to find what works best for you. One of the tips I've used and I find quite useful is actually to work out, by which time you have to move on. You do not want to start counting in your mind in the exam, oh, have I spent 40 minutes or 30 minutes? Oh no, I get confused. So in fact, for example, if your exam starts in the afternoon, most of the time it will start at around 1:40, but do check your admission device. Do then plan out like at what time that you have to move on. So I work out that, I need around 40 minutes for the appendix, the content, introduction, term of reference. So I know by 2:50, no matter where I am at whatever I'm doing, I have to stop and move on to do the prioritization discussions. And by 3:40, I know that I have to be writing on the recommendation and the ethics, and I should be at least sort of starting on the conclusion and part B at 4:40. So this is one of the ways that you can really keep track, and I will actually write this down on my answer booklet, almost like the first thing, so I can constantly refer to this time, this milestone I set myself, and actually follow on that. Again, the top tips, like in the paper, move on with kindness. It's very, very important to finish the whole report. Because you have enough discussions that can compensate for a very weak recommendation. It won't work that way. Your chance of passing will be a lot lower, and the marks you get from the integration, the focus, will be actually quite weak if you do not complete your whole examination. So coming to the end of the presentation today, just to show you how T4 is being marked. So this is actually one of the marking scheme, not from CIMA, it's by BPP here, but CIMA actually do work from a very similar kind of matrix as well. So you can see, like technical, you will get 1 mark just for using the right models, and then more marks will be given on the applications as well. And we talk about prioritization. So if you get 5 marks before the issue are in the right order, are being identified, and the top 2 issues are ranked in the correct order. So again, if you get the order prioritization wrong, it's not a sudden death, but again, it will be a very tough time that you have to work against the current to convince the examiner why you have ranked it that way. Judgment, again, I want to bring your attention here. So if you look at the top priority cash flow here, you can actually score up to 7 marks, on the judgment, the discussion of this part. But the lower one, the currency, even if you write a beautiful, discussion on that, the most you can is going to get 2 marks. So a lot of the mark is going to be weighted for the top 3 priorities. And that's why I say it's very important to get this correct. And even if you're running out of time, you should try to write as much as possible for the top 3 priorities to content of E3, P3, and F3 under the 2015 syllabus. So if you are unsuccessful in your next in the coming attempt, you have to do the case study, and you need to be also aware of some of the syllabus changes in E3, P3, and F3 because they could be examined in the new case study as well. The good news is the exam is going to be available 4 times a year on computer-based, and and there'll be 4 windows. So it's not just 1 day out of the 5-day windows. You can just choose to do exam in any 1 day. It's a completely different format. So whatever we have just talked today is only applicable for the November 2014 exam under the current 2010 syllabus. Next year is a case study. It's going to be a completely different format, completely different marking criteria. So we're going to have further section on that. Saying so, I mean, you still have a very good chance. You have got, just over 1 month to work on this, and I think your chance of passing is still very high. And you really should, push yourself because once you pass the exam, this is the final paper. So once you've done this, you don't even have to worry about 2015 because you're done forever for CIMA examinations. So do, give whatever you can in this final month and, trying to get it over and done with. If you have not done your T4 Part 8 yet, the professional experience requirement, you still have to do it, even in the 2015 syllabus. There's currently no change yet to the PR requirement, but they're under review. So, but as far as currently we're concerned, there's no change, and it's the same requirement you have, under as is the current syllabus. So, thank you very much for joining the WebEx section today. I know it's a little bit long, and